If you're like me and you love painting in watercolor, but you sometimes struggle with what to paint and finding the right ideas and subjects, and painting a big painting is, too daunting, or you just don't have the time for it, then maybe this video can give you some ideas on how I approach this problem. Because I do love to paint, and I love to paint every day if I can, and often it's just for 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes. So these little sketches, I like this barn here is perfect for this type of time slot, and as a just a I would call it an exercise really, or a bit of practice. Now this is not entirely my own subject, because that's the problem, is finding the right subject. So what I often do is I just pull out a book off my shelf, my watercolor books, and then just look up for a painting or a sketch that really triggers my interest, and then I just kind of interpret it. I don't copy it exactly, but I sort of try and put my own spin on it. Now, this subject here, this barn, is from a book by Ron Ranson, and it's called Learn Watercolor the Edgar Whitney Way. It's in the description if you want to look that one up. That's got, tons of great paintings in there. That's worthwhile copying. So I sketched out the little barn. I call it little, it's probably a big barn, but it's a small sketch with light pencils, and I've only got a few colors in my palette. These are just colors I've used for another painting, and they were left over, so I'm just going to continue to reuse it. And started off with framing the house with some blue sky color, and I keep it very loose and wet. That's what I want to try with this exercise, or with this sketch here, is to not paint a lot of detail, and just dropping in colors and be quite creative with the way that I use the colors. I'm also only going to use a one brush, which is a relatively cheap Chinese calligraphy brush. You can pick those up anywhere from any art supply store, or Amazon, or anywhere else really. And I find them great fun to work with, because you can get a lot of precision with it, but you can also get a lot of texture with it. You can see it's quite soft right now, but I can press it down and then create interesting textures for dry brushing, for grass textures, or just random textures. Now I've pretty much smothered the whole page just with these colors, let it bleed and run, and the only thing I sort of paid a bit of attention to is to keep the roof white, and then just added some texture for the corrugated iron there. But I don't want to overdo the roof. That's kind of the highlight of the painting. And it's still very wet, so I'm just going to drop in some darks. Now, these colors are a bit weird, so I can't really mix my traditional colors, so I'm just going to work with what I've got. I mixed a dark color out of the cobalt, the red, and the green. There's some red, brown oxide on there as well, and I just care about the values more than really about which color it is. So what's light and what's dark. So back to the problem of not knowing what to paint. I find it far more important that I paint anything rather than something specific. For me, every time I pick up a brush and put it on paper, I learn something. I fail or I succeed, it doesn't really matter. As long as I'm having fun and I'm getting into the zone, and just spend a bit of time worrying about colors and pigments, and not about everything else that's going on in the world. So you can see I left that first layer to dry completely. It didn't take that long. Probably even used a hairdryer just to speed it up a bit. But it's giving me a good base. Lots of different colors in there, some value shifts. And I'm just adding in the darker values for some definition. Remix the darkest color. It's like a dark purple is kind of the darkest I could get to by using the blue, the red, and the green together. And then I'm just adding some shadows for the windows and under the roof. So having watercolor books of artists that you like is a good way of having an endless supply of ideas that you can paint with. And as you probably know, if you have books, it's not easy to paint from books, because even though they sometimes give you, photos of the sequence of how they painted, it doesn't tell the whole story. It's very different to watching someone painting in a video like this one, what you're doing right now, when you can actually see step by step what they're doing, how much water they're using, what colors they're using, and the order of things. But picking up a book, picking a painting, or an image out of the book and then trying to recreate it, you learn a lot because you have to reverse engineer, and have to guess at some of the techniques that they may have used or the sequence that they may have used. And if you want to uh, match the colors, then you got to think about, how would they have achieved those colors precisely. And I don't want to copy it, like for like. As I said earlier, that's rarely my objective. I want to just get something from it. It's mostly an idea, and then to see how can I paint this in my own way, or what do I particularly like about it, and what am I going to focus on. I was attracted to the simplicity of this composition, an old rugged barn with kind of fantasy colors, to be honest. They're not real colors. Wouldn't find a barn like that out in the wild. And then it's sort of the juxtaposition between the very loose first layer, the wet and wet, and the blending of the colors, and then coming in with some very defined lines to create a detail. This is one of the styles that I'm very attracted to. Artists who finish off their painting with calligraphy and hard details right at the end. And the calligraphy brushes are perfect for that because you can create these interesting marks with it. And they're a bit random sometimes because the brush will bend in unexpected ways, but that gives your painting that bit of a feel of randomness, which I like as well. I'm not a very controlled painter. I like my paintings to be quite loose and free, and the marks not to be too deliberate. And as you can see, after I've let this painting dry, I've hardly put in any additional big shapes. That all happened in that first layer, which is what I try to practice or experiment with this particular painting, is putting down a foundation in the first layer that's quite interesting and varied with different blends and wet and gradients, and then literally just adding fine details and some marks as my second layer without really having to paint or do a lot of glazing in my second layer. In larger paintings, or the traditional way that I would approach a watercolor painting would be to lay down a light layer, then a mid-value layer, and then come in at the details. But I basically skipped the whole middle layer of this and just went from my first wet and wet straight to the detailed stage. So that's definitely something that I found interesting in this exercise. I haven't really done that before, so I've learned something, and maybe you can take something from that as well. But the main point I want to get across here is, if you don't know what to paint, keep your subject simple, pick up someone else's painting as a reference, don't copy it like for like, put your own spin on it, and be clear about what you want to learn or practice in that particular session. So I hope you enjoyed this little barn. I certainly did, and see you next time.